Namaskar. Welcome to Radio Karishma's YouTube channel. I'm your host Karishma Himatsinghani. In the series of very interesting and inspiring interviews, you will hear a very interesting interview with the renowned activist Sushil Pandit, Dr. Rajat Mitra and Professor Kundan Singh of Hindu University. Topic is very close to every Indian's heart wherever they live, Kashmir. You heard the first part of the interview where Sushil Pandit talked about the history of Kashmir. In this second part, you will see how Sushil ji is giving insight on the current situation in Kashmir. Enjoy the interview. But before that, don't forget to subscribe our channel. 1990 is a very important year, especially for the generation who grew up in that time. And with people like me, the generation of we see Kashmir issue starting from 1990, though we understand that it started 1948. But I think even though the media at that time failed, this particular, the Kashmiri Hindus and not reporting correctly, but still this whole problem or the whole issue came in forefront after that exodus happened. How important you see that in the history of Kashmir, that year 1990, and after that, what is happening?
You see, 1990 was the last major exodus from Kashmir, but it was more painful than the previous 6 major exoduses. Mm-hmm. Far more painful. Primarily because earlier exoduses were a distant memory.
Yeah.
Our generation, our immediate previous generation didn't suffer them.
Yeah.
So we'd only heard about them. But when you read about them, when you hear about them, it rekindles that fear, that trauma, which has been perpetuating over several hundred years. But something that you suffer firsthand is something that is most painful. But the reasons were more than that. It was not so much the pain and suffering of this exodus. It is the realization that the previous 6 exoduses happened when India was under an alien rule. When we were under the boot of tyrants.
Yep.
When there was nothing called a constitution.
Yeah.
When there was nothing called a parliament.
Yep.
When there was no concept of human rights. When there were no courts, for example. So there was no system, criminal justice system as we know it today. There were no institutions like UN.
Mm-hmm.
There was no vibrant press those days that could report.
Yep.
In 16th century, in 17th century, in 18th century, those are medieval times. We didn't have an army of our own, for example. We couldn't resist. We were disarmed. Yep. We were not united as a country because we were broken up into smaller little kingdoms here and there.
Yeah.
So you can understand. But 1990 happened when India's population was 900 million. We had 800 elected MPs. We had a parliament and a prime minister. We had Supreme Court, dozens of high courts and lower courts. We had police, we had 1.5 million strong army, some of the freest press in the world, Declaration of Human Rights, fundamental rights, this, that, and the other. And none of it worked. Not one. None of it worked. We were left without alibis. We ask ourselves even today, search within, our number in Kashmir Valley was less than 5% of the population, and that too spread thin. We were in every village, every district, every kasbah, every town, every mohalla. Even if we were in the minority of one house surrounded by 150, we were there. Spread completely thin because we didn't come from outside to create a ghetto.
Yep.
We lived there as original inhabitants, and people around us converted or settled down, and we were left into small little islands all over. And if in some stray village we did not exist, we had access to that village as teachers, as postmen, as doctors, as clerks, government servants, or whatever. So, one of the reasons why we were expelled from Kashmir, despite such a small number, an absolutely harmless track record. As a community, we pride ourselves with the fact that we are 100% educated.
Yep.
When I say educated, I don't mean literate. I mean educated, and not 99.9 or 6 or 7%, 100%. And we have 0% crime. And when I say 0% crime, what I mean to say is you can't find me a Kashmiri Pandit in any jail anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
This kind of a pacifist community was brutalized and thrown out in 1990 because we had Kashmir in our sight, in our earshot. We saw what was happening, we heard everything, we knew everything, we knew who was up to what. And therefore, in our presence, this monkey business could not have succeeded. We were considered patriots.
Yeah.
We were called mukhbirs of India. And we paid the price for that. But we still lived on there till 1990 thinking that India is a large country with a massive army. And so long as the tricolor flutters over the secretariat and our army sits in the Badami Bagh cant,
Nothing can happen.
nobody can dare touch us because this huge, mighty country will come down on such a thought like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
Such were our illusions, Karishma ji.
And it still happened. That's why this exodus is most painful.
Hence, we still
One of
can't
the
make
things,
sense of what
if I
happened.
may come in just a little bit here, is that we have, sorry to speak about the statistics, Sushilji, I know it is very painful, and given the blackout that has happened in media of the exodus, it's with extreme sadness that I have to ask you this question. Could you please give us the numbers, number of people killed and number of people driven away from Kashmir?
Okay, so the number of people driven away from Kashmir, there are 62,000 families who registered in Jammu.
Wow.
There are 12,000, no, there are about 52,000 who registered in Jammu. There are 12,000 who registered in Delhi. There are lots of them who did not register because these are the two places where registrations were happening. So, a rough estimate of about, say, 75,000 families and 5 to each family as an average would take it well beyond 350,000 people in 1990 who in the last 30 years could have easily grown up to double the number. Then there were families who were already staying outside Kashmir for the reasons of education or occupation, but they had a live connect because their families back home, their lands, their homes, their relatives and friends would keep them bringing back to Kashmir as often as 2 to 3 times in a year. So That's the kind of number that was driven out. As far as murders are concerned, the record of specific names who were killed runs into about 1,300 and something. 328 or 338, it's been kept by Panun Kashmir. Several rapes happened, massacres happened, homes were burnt and vandalized, temples were desecrated, orchards were encroached upon, farms taken over, shops and businesses taken over. So it was nothing short of a genocide, meticulously executed. So much so that newspaper notices were issued on front pages. 4th of January, Al Safa carried a notice that Kafirs leave Kashmir Valley or else you will be responsible for your consequences. And the same was repeated by Aftab on 6th of January. Front page of the local newspapers. Home Minister of India was from Kashmir, Mufti Muhammad Saeed those days. Chief Minister of Kashmir was Dr. Farooq Abdullah. CRP was not deployed. Army was not deployed. In fact, police was also withdrawn. There was no sight of any security forces. I remember people frantically calling home ministries, governors' residences, media houses, bureaucrats, and getting no response. Army said, we can't deploy ourselves on our own unless there is an order. So please tell the Home Ministry. None was interested.
Yeah.
It is breathtaking how in this day and age, on such a scale, you could carry out this program. I'll tell you, in 1999, in the Adriatic, Kosovo happened of a much smaller scale. When Yugoslavia was imploding, Serbs and Croats and Bosnians were at each other's throats. You know what happened? NATO planes took off from their bases in Italy from March 20 to April 10. 20 days of Air Force bombing, incessant bombing of civilian areas happened. In Kashmir, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
So,
In Kosovo, within 3 years, people were restored back to their homes. Genocide trials happened. Names like Robodan Karadzic, Slobodan Milosevic, they went through trials for war crimes. In Kashmir, those who drove us out became icons, leaders, Prime Minister inviting them for breakfast. Civil society offering them platform, asking them what to do next in Kashmir. Government of India giving them passports, interceding on their behalf with other countries to give them visas, traveling all over the world. Hundreds of crores spent on them in their hotel bills, their airline bills, their telephone, their security, even their treatment in US hospitals was paid for by Indian taxpayer. These school dropout urchins who were soaked in our blood were treated like sons-in-law.
You mean to say that the Congress government was complicit in this genocide? Because they were the ones who were government of India, right?
That's true. At that time, VP Singh was ruling. He didn't last more than 11 months. VP Singh was the prime minister. This government was supported by BJP from outside and the left front also from outside. Congress was in government in Kashmir in coalition with Dr. Farooq Abdullah. So entire political spectrum of India was in the power structure somewhere or the other. So nobody screamed. There is a Zulu saying, when a dog has a bone in his mouth, he doesn't bark. So every dog in this country had a bone in his mouth at that time.
So, Sushilji, when Narendra Modi government came in 2014, there was a lot of hope, and still there is a lot of hope, and a lot has changed also after that, positively, as far as Kashmir issue is concerned. How do you see their performance in this context?
I must say this, 5th of August last year, I must tell you this, I never thought in my lifetime I'll see a day like this. I think describing such a decision as historic or unprecedented is understating it. It started a new epoch for India.
And you're
It's a,
referring to 370, right?
that's right, that's right. There was an India before August 5, and there is an India after August 5. So much so that even the world sat up and took notice, because such daring, such commitment and such courage of conviction was never shown by any previous government.
Yeah.
So this is something to really hold up as an example of amazing political will and great sagacity on part of our leadership to have taken this decision. And why I had given up hope for any such decision is because the same government in the previous 5 years had actually gone completely turtle on its own worldview of Kashmir, had actually gone into a collaboration with PDP, the most pernicious political force in Kashmir,
Yep.
had committed to some of the worst kind of promises, including never removing 370, never touching it, including talking to Hurriyat, which clearly articulates breakup of India, about reversing their foreign policy, started talking to Pakistan,
Yep.
which they had completely abandoned. The principle of terror and talks cannot go together is what Prime Minister Modi's contribution to our foreign policy is. It is a remarkable position to take.
Yeah.
But he went back on this very position to create a coalition in Kashmir. So we were disappointed and disheartened, not without reason.
Yeah.
And hence, what happened on August 5 last year came like an amazing surprise, the most delectable, delightful surprise one could have experienced. I can't recall being so exuberant and so happy ever before. I know people who cried in sheer disbelief. So I think I don't have words to describe what happened last year. And this alone, this policy initiative alone, almost, completely acquits him
Yeah.
of whatever we held him guilty of in
Yeah.
the previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Sushil ji, sorry, Karishma ji,
yeah,
if
go
you
ahead.
want to please. The question that I have is that is Article 370 going to lead to rehabilitation of the Kashmiri Hindus who were displaced from Kashmir?
Uh, I don't think so. Because while this was a very important step, but this was only the first step. And I must tell you, the reason is India's policy in Kashmir over the last 70 years has created huge roadblocks for India itself in Kashmir. Article 370 owes its origin to the Constituent Assembly of India when it was incorporated in India's constitution. What a travesty it was. I mean, Article 370 was only a symptom, was only a manifestation, and manifestation of a mindset. What did Article 370 do? Article 370 circumcised the authority of Indian Parliament over the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Indian Parliament, which is our highest sovereign body, which has jurisdiction over every square inch of land called India, was impotent, rendered impotent by Article 370 vis-a-vis Kashmir. It could not legislate on Kashmir. And under Article 370 through 35A, Constitution of India could not be extended to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So Kashmir was given a different constitution altogether. And not just a different constitution. Under Delhi agreement, Jawaharlal Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah decided that Kashmir will have its own flag. That Kashmir's chief minister will be called a prime minister. And that any Indian citizen from rest of India desirous of going to Kashmir will have to take a permit, just as you take visa to visit a foreign country. Such were the provisions created one after the other. Kashmir was allowed to define its own citizens as different from citizens of India and give them privileges. Privileges such as only citizens of Kashmir could buy land in Kashmir. Only the citizens of the permanent residents of Kashmir, is called PRC, Permanent Resident Certificate. Only they could send their children to state institutions to study or to do jobs in state government, or for that matter, to vote in the assembly elections or even the panchayat elections. So there were more than 10 lakh such people, Indian citizens in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, who could vote in the parliamentary elections but could not vote in the assembly elections or even panchayat. And then, because it allowed them their own constitution, that constitution did not have any idea of fundamental rights. It created gender inequality by saying that if the daughter of Kashmir married an outsider, her children won't be able to inherit her immovable property. But if the son of Kashmir goes out and even marries a Pakistani, the wife would be the citizen of Kashmir, the children will have all the rights. Some Balmiki families who were the Safai Karamcharis, the scavengers, the sweepers in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, were told, if your children with education and aspiration seek any other profession or career, they would lose the state citizenship.
Wow.
And the entire Dalit movement in India just preferred to go deaf and mute and blind and never took up this issue. So, blatant discrimination. For example, again, Kashmir's constitution did not utter the word minority even once. So when minorities of Kashmir such as us ask them, what about the minority rights? You don't agree with Indian constitution, you have your own constitution. So Indian constitution guarantees minority rights. Kashmir's constitution doesn't even acknowledge its minorities. How about some minority rights? You know what the establishment in Kashmir did? They said, all right, on minority rights, we will go by the Indian constitution.
Yeah.
Now, in Indian constitution, Muslims were the minorities. So in Kashmir, in the Kashmir Valley, where 95% plus population was of Muslims, they were the minorities. And we 5% Hindus were the majority. Such travesties, I mean, this kind of blatant partisanship, discrimination was unbelievable. And this was practiced in Kashmir. Practiced in Kashmir by them is not surprising. Was allowed to be practiced in Kashmir by rest of India.
Yeah, that was my question.
That's surprising.
What could be the reason behind it? Now that we are talking about a lot of layers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, that is the crux of the issue.
Yeah.
Why was this done? Even last year, when Supreme Court was examining one of the provisions of Article 370, which is 35 capital A, Mehbooba Mufti, who was still recently then the chief minister, said, you have no right to review these things because Jammu Kashmir is a Muslim majority state and these privileges have been given to us under the autonomy promised to us because we are a Muslim majority state. So our great Democrat Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru created these exceptions, gave these privileges because Jammu and Kashmir was a Muslim majority state. Never mind the fact that India was being put together as a democratic, secular republic. But Kashmir, being a Muslim majority state, could get away by flouting all secular norms, all democratic norms. Let me tell you, the Constituent Assembly that created the Constitution of the state of Jammu and Kashmir had 75 members. 73 out of those 75 members were elected unopposed because Sheikh Abdullah cancelled all the nominations of his rivals. He stole that election and Jawaharlal Nehru allowed him to do that.
So basically, the discrimination against Hindus was legalized.
Completely. You created a Pakistan on the territory of India. You handed over a state, a province on a platter to Islamist mindset as an appeasement because you sought the certificate of secularism from a Muslim majority state to hold it up as the proof of our secularism. See how generous we are with our minorities. In the name of autonomy, we allow them all kinds of distortions, all kinds of perversions, and we let them ride rugshod over the minorities, the Hindu minorities in a Hindu majority country. So this was the proof We wanted to show the world and the Muslims of rest of India that, see, how generous we are. This is what our secularism is.
So, Sushilji, one question comes into my mind when we talk about the role of media or the internationalizing this whole issue. So, me and Kundanji, we were talking yesterday, and then, we have usually seen Kashmir issue has been internationalized by Pakistan, mostly stating it as a territorial issue. And we Indians, we always, I mean, the subsequent governments have said that, well, Kashmir is an internal issue and we don't want to discuss outside. But what about the human rights issues that were happening in Kashmir? Why were they not internationalized like other human rights issues? Why couldn't India or the government of India or the activists in India or the Indian media could internationalize that suffering? Forget the territory,
Very good question. Even today, I am told to hold my tongue and not be so loud and repetitive about these issues. And I ask why. And they say this demonizes the Muslims and we further alienate them by accusing them of their crimes, by pointing out to their excesses. We are actually alienating, annoying, and further distancing them. So, the price that we must pay for our secularism is to suffer and keep quiet. Our media is told to play it down. Our parliamentarians are told not to raise it in the parliament, in the assemblies. Our courts are told not to entertain our petitions for justice because it demonizes Muslims.
As if there is, there are other things that they have not done and is not talked about in the world. We hear about now, there is even President Trump has openly said that there is a radical Islam and has done a lot of brutal things in the world. So why can't we talk about what has happened in India before, the world, has seen other things, but then we have seen firsthand for many decades, many centuries.
In fact, Karishma ji, I would want to say here that when it comes to the Kashmiri Hindus, there's nothing called radical Islam. Islam as an ideology to unbelievers gives three options: convert them, kill them, or put them under heavy taxation. So, we can beat around this bush, but the fact of the matter is that this issue is a religious one.
Yes.
And until and unless we address the religious issue, which is behind this problem is not going to go away. See, whatever the world may say about the Hindus, whatever the media may say about the Hindus, whatever academia may say about the Hindus, fact of the matter is that Hinduism is a plural and a diverse tradition which knows how to coexist with difference. It knows how to coexist and respect people of different faiths and beliefs. This is what it has done since antiquity. Islam, on the other hand, as an ideology, has not manifested this. The very fact that the Hindus were driven away from Kashmir is basically because Kashmir was and is a Muslim majority state. During the partition of India, Hindus in Pakistan and Bangladesh together, Bangladesh, which was East Pakistan at that point in time, comprised of 23% of the population. In togetherness, now the Hindus are 3% of the population. In India, whereas the Muslim population has grown, in Pakistan and Bangladesh, the Hindu population has substantially come down. So what has happened to the Hindus? Why does the world does not raise these questions? Why do human rights groups do not raise these questions? What happened to the Hindus? They did not disappear into thin air. They did not evaporate, right? They have been converted. And the ones who refuse to convert, have been raped and killed as well. This is the saga which these two countries have left behind vis-a-vis the Hindus. So it is very unfortunate at this point in time that truth has become a matter of political correctness. And if humanity wants to advance, if academia and media want to take their job seriously, then they will need to get beyond political correctness and look at the truth of the matter. The fact of the matter is that the Hindus in Kashmir, Bangladesh, and Pakistan have suffered immensely, and it's job of humanity actually to bring this out and prevent further persecution which is going on. So sorry to interrupt you, Sushil ji.
Karishma ji, in the same context, I must tell you, when partition happened, 1950, Nehru, our Prime Minister, and Liaquat Ali Khan, the Pakistani Prime Minister, entered into a pact. It is called Nehru-Liaquat Pact. That Nehru-Liaquat Pact was about the respective states of Pakistan and India taking responsibility for the welfare and protection of their respective minorities. Because as soon as partition happened, the Hindus in Pakistan, both East and West Pakistan, began to suffer persecution. And the constant stream of these Hindus running away to India started. And the continued instability of borders, of migration induced by these atrocities was something that both the states, especially India, was unwilling to perpetuate or continue. So they got into a pact. Now, the subtext of this pact was that we have Muslims in India as minorities, and you have Hindu, Sikhs, and Buddhists there as minorities. If you wish to see the Muslims of India looked after well, you better look after the Hindu, Sikhs, and Buddhists within your own country. So these was as if the mutual hostaging.
Yeah.
Now in India, the mindset was never to harm Muslims. Actually, Gandhi and Nehru insisted that Muslims who had voted with their feet for Pakistan could continue staying here. So they stopped the Muslims of Bihar and UP from migrating. Though they had routed Congress in the elections and supported Muslim League and voted for the creation of Pakistan.
Yes.
Same was not the case in two Pakistans. There the Hindus never asked for partition. They did not know they will get caught in this madness. And this pact gave them a false sense of assurance that, okay, now India and Pakistan have mutually hostaged each other's populations. So now Pakistan would be obliged to look after us. In India, we kept our side of the bargain. Muslim population in India was under 10% at the time of partition. It is over 15% now.
It's 23 actually. Yeah.
It was less than 4 crores then. It is 20 crores now. And you've just heard the figures from Kundanji about the population in now Bangladesh, then East Pakistan and West Pakistan. You can't even find them. Their temples, their cremation grounds have all but disappeared. They themselves are in hiding, and their young prepubescent girls are routinely lifted.
Kidnapped.
At least 3,000 every year, and converted and forcibly married to middle-aged men who are already married with children. So there is an ongoing genocide. And forget Pakistan on the west and Bangladesh on the east. I am talking about India. In India right now, there are more than 500 Kashmirs festering, where Hindus have been pushed into a minority status, and now they are willing to leave their lands, their homes, sell them cheap and run away to safety because they can't keep the honor of their women folk or their lives, their own lives, safe. So we continue under an onslaught. Forget remote areas like Kishanganj, Araria, Khagadia, or Murshidabad, or Chobis Pargana, or Malda. I am talking about Delhi city, the capital city. Here, the localities are seeing exodus of Hindus. Whether it is Sundarnagari, whether it is Jafrabad, whether it is Seelampur, whether it is Shaheen Bagh, whether it is Okhla, or Nizamuddin West in my neighborhood. In the capital city, right under the nose of all the sundry Hindu Hriday Samrats we have.
So, Sushilji, coming back to Kashmir problem, after 370, as you said, that we're so happy that there is a new era, and then everybody thought outside India. I mean, people who are not from Kashmir, but not from India, the NRIs who are living abroad, even they thought now, 370 is gone, and now very happily ever after Kashmir Hindus will return to their country, land, and everything will be hunky dory. Of course, we do understand that it will take some time, but where are we lacking? The recent murder of the Sarpanch, was a big jolt, and suddenly everybody's shaken to again wake up. That is not going to be that easy, even though 370 is gone. Then it looks like just a mere number.
I can understand where your optimism was coming from. While 370 became the focal point of, or the most compelling expression of the problem called Kashmir, but it was only the first step. It was only the signaling of intent. What changed was an announcement in the parliament and the president signing some papers. On ground, the changes had to happen. First things first, in the last 30 years, what happened to Kashmiri Pandits was never acknowledged. We were treated like flood victims or earthquake victims. We were called migrants or displaced people. The fact that we were victims of a genocide, a carnage, is still not acknowledged. Number two, all the murders and massacres, all the rapes, all the abductions, all the burning of homes and desecration of temples, all those heinous crimes, not one has been prosecuted. Not one crime has gone through the process of court to identify the guilty and punish and deliver a sentence. Not one, even as an exception. Three, a lot of people tell us from Kashmir, but we didn't pull the trigger on you. We did not come and threaten you. What could we do? There were guns floating around. We were as scared as you were. All right. But a large number of them who did not wield the gun, who did not come and threaten us, became the beneficiaries of our genocide. They
Yeah.
walked into our homes, they grabbed our lands, they picked up our businesses and shops. They persuaded us to sell them in distress because we had nothing left on us to educate our children or to provide for the medicines of our old parents. We had to sell our homes for a song. So beneficiaries of our genocide still have an incentive to commit another genocide
Oh.
should we ever return. So their ill-gotten gains have to be reversed, they have to be taken away from them. Three things: acknowledge that we were victims of a genocide, deliver justice to the survivors and victims of that genocide, take away the ill-gotten gains of this genocide. Unless these three things are done, removal of Article 370 and reorganization of the state would remain a cosmetic step, mere declaration of intent which was not followed through with an action on ground. What kind of a place should we go in where you do not offer us a compact piece of land where all of us can live together, keep ourselves secure, rebuild our society? Our homes are taken, our lands are taken. Where do we go? How do we return? And as if that was not enough, just 3 months back, this government has come out with a policy called domicile law. In the middle of a lockdown, when all government offices and private institutions were shut down, when all airlines were grounded and the trains were halted, when there was no marketplace, no shop available, no traffic, a gazetted notification came out saying only those people in the Union Territory of Jammu Kashmir who stayed there for 15 years will qualify to be the domicile citizens of that Union Territory, and they will have a monopoly over all the state government jobs.
Wow.
Bringing back the provisions of Article 370 through a back door. Who are you trying to appease? A place which was in a fortress-like condition of Article 370, where no Indian could ever go. Now you demolish that wall 1 year back. You have not even created conditions enough for any Indian to contemplate moving there, and you start raising another wall. Who are you trying to please?
So you are basically saying that Kashmiri Hindus who were displaced in 1990 because of this provision will not be able to go back to Kashmir and basically buy any property, right?
No, they will be able to. They will be able to. There is an exception made for them.
Okay, okay.
Earlier, actually, what you said was a genuine fear because we were not specifically mentioned. It took this government 45 days to clarify. The notification came on 31st of March. The clarification came on 15th of May. We were reduced to running around government offices with petitions. What about us? So I'm telling you, the mindset has not changed. Governments have changed, prime ministers have come and gone, different parties have run the government. But the mindset of winning hearts and minds in Kashmir, of the jihadis, still prevails.
So, what is the solution, Sushilji? How do we change that? How do you see that happening, in coming years? Because,
First of all, acknowledge the problem for what it is. These are not wayward boys who've been bribed 500 rupees to wage war against India.
yeah,
There is a jihad going on.
Yes.
Don't kid yourself.
Yes.
Acknowledge it.
But
We still do
hasn't
not
your
use the word jihad.
acknowledgement has happened, right? I mean, in so many,
No,
no?
no, no, no. Government of India still doesn't use the word jihad. It says there is alienation. It says there is Pakistan fomented terrorism.
Yeah.
It's a fact. But who are these terrorists? They call themselves Lashkar-e-Tayyaba, Jaish-e-Muhammad, Hizbul Mujahideen. And they say we are waging jihad here. They themselves say we are waging jihad here, but government of India doesn't want to say so because jihad has a direct Islamic connotation. And government of India says if we start calling it a jihad, Muslims will feel annoyed and alienated. They don't want to acknowledge our genocide. They don't want to deliver justice because when we ask for justice, they say, don't demonize Kashmiris. Move on. Move on is what we are told. What will you get by hanging a few people? So we must go back and live amongst our killers, roaming around as leaders. Under what hope? I mean, is this country going to use us as some kind of a ransom to be paid to secularism? Are we going to be used as sandbags for India's unity and integrity? Sacrificial lambs at the altar of your overtures to Islam and Muslims. Tell us.
So, Sushilji, what if we see because of social media and the way there is an awareness everywhere now, how do you see the international Hindu community coming together and fighting for this problem? Have ever this thought, come to the organizations or people like you who've been into this, and I have seen you going to all the world forums, has there any thought or the plan been that something should be done as a collective Hindu consciousness and tackle this problem, or push the government towards the right step, or acknowledging it that it's actually Hindu genocide that is happening in the name of
Absolutely.
religion?
Exactly. This is everyone's experience across the length and breadth of this land called Bharatvarsh, that whenever the Hindu demography was unsettled, the land got alienated, our boundaries shrunk, and our civilization retreated. These are the lessons for the past 1000 years. And those who are running the government today, when they were in opposition, they were telling us these lessons. They were teaching this us in Abhyas Vargs, in their Patraks, in their Vijayadashmi Sambodhans, in their Guru Purnima Dakshina Sambodhans and Bodhiks. I have learnt it from them. I didn't know any better earlier. So I don't have to tell them this. The point is, the reluctance to do the right thing when in the government is astounding. Continuation of the policies of the past when the mandate is for change is astounding. For the first 5 years of this government from 2014 to 2019, Hurriyats were the honored guests of India. Government of India, Indian taxpayer was paying more than 125 crores every year for their upkeep. Nothing changed. So unless you change the policy, Dr. Kundan Singh is an academic. You show me in the last 6 years one initiative in the education system of this government. One change in the textbook, one paragraph, forget a chapter.
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. None. I'm absolutely candid about it.
It's
I've
more the same
just,
thing.
yeah, I've just reviewed, the history textbooks of 6th and 7th grade. Nothing has shifted.
So we are banging our heads against the wall, asking them to do things that they themselves said should be done. Who do we go to? Our predicament isn't that we are faced with a hostile government who's bent upon troubling us. No, we are faced with a friendly government who's reluctant to do what it itself promised that they would do. So, I mean, we are in a, and there isn't an alternative we could go to.
Yeah.
So we have to keep badgering this very government and this very leadership and tell them that, listen, the entire nation stands behind you like a rock.
Yeah.
Don't make the last year's August 5 decision look like a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
Please take the follow-up steps, because that was symbolism.
Yeah.
Symbolism has to be followed by
Concrete action.
Concrete action on ground. That concrete action on ground is missing. The stranglehold of jihad in Kashmir over media and academia, over judiciary and bureaucracy, over politics and civil society, over businesses and religious institutions is intact. Hasn't even been tinkered with. And we've already lost 10 months, 11 months.
Sushilji, then using this platform in the end, I would like to ask that what would be the grand message that you would like to give all over the Hindus who are listening to this, and of course to the Indian government?
That please start asking questions of this leadership. They have heard enough of claps and applause. You've doted over them for long. You've cheered them. You've helped them, stood by them. Now also, politely but firmly, start asking questions. What have you done? Why do you call Kashmir an internal issue and then carry ambassadors and foreign parliamentarians in batches to Kashmir and tell them, look at our internal matter? Why do you dismantle Article 370 and then you bring a domicile law from the back door and raise the barriers again? The barriers are for rest of India from getting into Kashmir. And so long as you keep avoiding addressing the issue of demography, demography is destiny.
Yeah.
If you do not address the issue of our demography, our destiny is in limbo.
Absolutely.
And this 15-year domicile prerequisite is jeopardizing this demography, which is already precariously poised in Kashmir.
Yeah.
In Kashmir, we have tens of thousands of Rohingyas who not only have got land and Aadhaar cards, they've also got water connections, electricity connections, bank accounts, and not one has been moved out. It's been 6 years and counting.
Well, it's so funny that whenever we spoke about that, once 370, abolished, then we can bring in outsiders to the Kashmir and all this demographic sham of they will be gone. But then look at this. This is very, I don't know what to say. It's disgusting, right? I mean, you just feel that all the hopes that you had of this 370 being abolished, that was all sham. That was, it's just that we hoped and it didn't happen.
I would still not give up hope. A lot of people are saying that it's like burning the candle at both the ends. You've pleased your constituency by dismantling 370. Now you're back to making overtures, saying that we will restore this privilege, that privilege. Don't worry, we are there for you.
So, Sushilji, I have one question. When you look at Indian media, there's a certain section of Indian media which basically lauds itself in protection of human rights, and bring to the fore human right violations. What has your experience been with Indian media? You know, uh, I was wondering if you could please name, media houses that have supported the cause of Kashmiri Hindus, and media houses which have taken great pains to scuttle the voice of the Kashmiri Hindus.
Yeah, that's a wonderful change that we are witnessing, because when 1990 happened, there was this conspiracy of silence and an almost total consensus on this issue that in Kashmir, if there is suffering, it is of Kashmiri Muslim under the occupying Indian army. That was the narrative. If there are human rights violations, it is of the majority Muslims at the hands of Indian establishment. That there are violations of Kashmiri Hindus who are the original natives of Kashmir didn't count for anything. And we were aghast, we were bewildered as to who to go to, because the dominant wisdom was to not look at us at all, not talk about us. We were confined to fringes and margins of the discourse. But in the last 10 years, I must say, with the advent of very competitive news television and with the advent of technology delivered media, which is, say, on the net, on the web, which has democratized the space, the media space, and really created a flat world. Earlier, the editor of Times of India would act as a gatekeeper
Yeah.
to all the opinions. Who will appear on op-ed page, who will appear on front page, who will have how big a headline, and who will be completely ignored. Now those stalwarts of mainstream media themselves have come, beaten their path to the internet, to the blogs, to the video logs, and to writing columns and putting together their YouTube videos. They have climbed down from their perches that they occupied and monopolized then, because social media, digital media has become a much stronger counterfoil to the traditional media. And television news with some very courageous anchors who become contrarians to the established left liberal wisdom of secularizing all genocides and romanticizing secularism. All that is now brought under a very harsh glare of scrutiny. So we have a vibrant debate, we have a contest going on, and in that contest, our voice is also heard. We are not disadvantaged because we are Hindus, and that has led to increased awareness, that has led to public pressure, and I would like to believe that that has led to dismantling of 370, because it is the public pressure and public opinion that very often forces the hands of governments, because tomorrow they have to win elections, they have to talk to their constituents, and they put them to some severe grilling because they had heard enough of it कि मंदिर वहीं बनाएंगे लेकिन तारीख नहीं बताएंगे. And
So,
now that question is done and dusted.
done and dusted. So, Sushilji, here I would like to also add one more point in Kundanji's question, and that is the international media. Somehow, the Kashmiri Hindu, voice, this issue has not been, taken to the international media forum, I would say. Not many activists or the writers who have written a lot in India, in Indian blogs and social media and Indian media now speaking, but we haven't heard too much of the Kashmiri Hindu side in international media. As opposed to from the Pakistani side, we have heard a lot. That's why most of the time you hear Washington Post writing in support of what is happening, the, Kashmir, what is happening in Kashmir, that the Indian army is killing Kashmiris there. But we haven't heard the Kashmiri Hindu side, this side of in the international media. What do you have to say that?
I also publish a journal on the culture and identity of Kashmir. It's called Prasnath. And in its inaugural event, when we were launching this journal, I had invited Mark Tully to be one of the panelists, and he publicly apologized. To his credit, he said, I have been the longest serving Western correspondent in Delhi, in India. And to the extent that whenever foreign envoys came on a posting, they would come to me for briefing, and a lot of media organizations would, from me, get a cue as to what is happening in India and in Kashmir and in Punjab, on Khalistan movement, Assam movement, this, that, and the other, Maoist trouble, politics, culture, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I am guilty
Yeah.
of overlooking the Hindu genocide of Kashmir, and I apologize for it. And through my eyes, the Western media, for the longest time, got misled. Um, that was very touching and very courageous of him to have acknowledged. But the die was cast, and this left liberal persuasion, which dominates the Western media, the BBCs, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times of the world, the Guardians, the Spectators of the world. They have this proclivity. Two, our adversary has made inroads, big time inroads.
They
They
have the
have,
vision. Yeah.
yes, they have gone and occupied positions of pivotal positions of strength and influence in these organizations, and they churn out that kind of narrative. But the bigger problem is this squeamish attitude of our own government. They don't see us, our issue, the Hindu genocide issue, as a very strong leverage in their hands to beat back this propaganda on human rights violations in Kashmir. Because they think if they play up our issue, they will alienate and antagonize and demonize the Muslim population, of which they have to win hearts and minds.
Wow.
So our government ties its own hands behind the back when it is trying to contest this narrative. And they put their focus on Gilgit-Baltistan, on Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, not on the plight of Hindu, Sikh, and Buddhist and Christian minorities from Kashmir itself. Because somewhere it also puts them in the dock. If you are the government, if you are the state in the country called India, what are you doing about these minorities instead of cribbing about their violations? Why aren't you punishing these crimes? Because they cannot go across the world saying Hindus have been targeted.
Yeah.
If Hindus are targeted, what have you done to give them justice? So it doesn't suit government of India to advance and push our narrative. That's our problem. Enemies are enemies, but the friends are apathetic. The friends are indifferent. So we are caught between brutality of jihad and apathy of a Hindu.
Yeah.
Indifference of our own government, our own state, our own nation.
Wow.
Sushilji, I have another question. And this is a personal one. I really like what you have been saying, and I'm pretty much sure that you are very candid and vocal about your ideas and issues within India as well. For speaking your mind, do you fear your life in India?
Well, I think we have to die one day, and it could be any day. So, yes, there have been threats, and yes, I have my near and dear ones fear for my life. And sometimes I too feel that I have a few more responsibilities to discharge, and probably it's not the time to go, so I should uh, be careful and not invite trouble. But I am alive today not because government of India or state of India has kept me secure. I am alive today because somebody has not decided to waste a bullet on me yet.
I hope it remains that way, Sushilji. We want more of you and more people like you there, raising voices for people who are voiceless. I would say, they have suffered so much. They have gone through so much that so many times I feel we can feel the pain, but they have gone through so much that they are not willing to talk about it anymore. I see some videos, I have seen some, when this killing happened recently, and I saw that young girls, almost like a war cry, and the bravery of that girl, it just moved all of us. But at the same time, you know I could totally understand that they have nothing to say. They have said enough, they have done enough. But hats off to people like you who are voicing their pain, and not even so much of that disappointment you must have felt, from the present government, or your ongoing the struggle towards this, and having hope, and then again snatched away from you. I give it to you that you are not tired, and you are still going on with your mission. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Yeah,
Thank
thank you so much for giving us your precious time. We really, really appreciate from the bottom of our heart.
thank you so much for organizing.
I will be in touch with you. I will write to you.
I
Thank you
welcome.
so much, Sushilji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kundanji, for joining us. Well, we'll definitely meet next time. Till that time, goodbye.
Yes, sir. Bye
Namaste.
bye.
Namaskar.
Namaste.
This brings us to the end of this interview. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Do write to us if you have any feedback, suggestions, or questions on rjkarishma@radiokarishma.com. Would love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe our channel to get more updates. Until next time, this is Karishma saying bye-bye. Namaskar.